in a literal sense. You're writing for white people. Are you aware of that?
I'm writing for people, baby. No, I don't believe in white people. I don't believe in black people either, for that matter. But I know the difference between being black and white in this, and at this time. It means that I cannot fool myself about some things, but I could fool myself about if I were white.
But more white people read your novels, I believe, than black people.
Well, black people may not read them, but they steal them. They sell them the hot in bars.
All right, everyone, we're going to take a little trip down memory lane. So there are some people we will not name, but they represent the colonial state. About 500 years ago, they decided they wanted some land over here. They lied for 500 years and told us no one was here. They said it was wilderness. They said it was populated by merciless Indian savages. These people who decided to steal this land decided they didn't want to work the land because that would be a bit too hard and their skin was a bit too fair for the sun. So they came over to my people and they stole us. They stole us to work on stolen land. And they call us the criminals.
While only 4% of the adult population in Canada, black peoples account for 9% of the federal prison population.
There was absolutely no need to pronounce black like that, so I will never be using AI voice again.
I mean, they're killing my friends. It's as simple as that. And I've been all the years that I've been alive. For no reasons which have any validity.
Why don't you just want to get away somewhere and sit down and write your books? Why don't you want to do that?
Because I'm better than that.
But you don't have to be better than that.
Oh, I do.
Don't wrestle your demons. Don't be a slave to your guilt. There's just one exit, and the worst is yet to come.
In 2022, hate crimes specifically targeting black peoples increased by 28%, accounting for 43% of all race or ethnic hate crimes. Regardless of reality, some Canadians still refuse to believe their government, the same one behind the Indian Act, South African apartheid, and the transatlantic slave trade, is still racist.
How, Sway?
It would appear that some Canadians are still stuck in the first stage of grief: denial.
You call your police department a systemically racist organization. It drove a huge wedge in between the membership and their confidence in City Hall. You can't do that in an organization that is 50% non-white.
What did you say?
You can't do that in an organization that is 50% non-white. 50% non-white.
No, I think that the guilt complex of the American white man is so profound until when you begin to analyze the real condition of the black man in America, instead of the American white man eliminating the causes that create that condition, he tries to cover it up by accusing his accusers of teaching hate. But actually, they're just exposing him for being responsible for what exists.
You can't do that in an organization that is 50% non-white. Take a look at the command level. This is not a racist organization. But he has gone a long way to try to promote that narrative.
Okay, so the first elephant in the room we must address is that
You ain't got the answers. You ain't got the answers, Sway.
Kanye.
I've been doing this more than you.
Doing what?
You ain't got.
second elephant. Just because half of your police officers are not white, if they happen to be of the second largest majority group of the city you are policing, they can still be systemically racist. As the numbers from your police departments continuously show, if you are not white or a very specific type of Asian, you are more likely to have a negative interaction with the police.
I won't tolerate for a second any racism, no matter if it's a black community or any minority community. Never have, never will.
A few moments later.
You come here like every other new Canadian has come here, you work your tail off. If you think you're coming to collect the dole and sit around, not going to happen.
People who are going to be closer and have more experience with things like having an incarcerated parent, they don't want to hear how many of the rich, wealthy people I know are woefully unhappy, like crazy unhappy. And in a lot of cases, a little bit lazy and a lot of bit stupid. Like people don't want to hear that. They don't want to know that. They want to think, but I see this person with this and that, and they got this and that. And I don't know how to tell them, yeah, because their uncle works in this industry, got them a job interning when they were 13, and they've never done anything else. They know all the people who are hiring for all the jobs, and they're getting them because they're there and they know how to do that job, that one job. They didn't have to be better than you in order to get the job. And I know you really want to think that like all you have to do is be better. All you have to do is, work harder and, be smarter, and then you'll have what they have. But baby, that's not how they got it. And they don't want to hear that.
And I'll come down hard on anyone who goes out there and talks about, derogatory remarks about any community. I don't care who it is. I'll come down like a ton of bricks on them.
The NDP called on Ford to apologize.
I have been pro-immigration from day one.
The Premier did not.
The double standard on forced displacement is glaring. Take, for example, the countries who have welcomed Ukrainian refugees: Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, and Moldova. Poland and Hungary have offered food, shelter, and all necessary aid to Ukrainians fleeing war. Yet in Poland, only 2 months ago, security forces were accused of torturing refugees from Palestine, Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Meanwhile, in Hungary, these are the images of a fence constructed to stop refugees from entering their borders. That is, non-white ones, of course. Now let's flip the script. Europe's biggest Muslim majority country, Turkey, has accepted Ukrainian refugees for years, without xenophobia and the hostility facing Muslim refugees when fleeing to Europe. And this phenomenon is not new, not at all.
Now the unthinkable has happened to them. And this is not a developing third world nation. This is Europe.
An argument that you will hear often on mainstream media is that Kiev, the capital of Ukraine, is a civilized place, unlike Afghanistan and Iraq. The irony is, civilization was present in Mesopotamia and Iraq long before it appeared in Eastern Europe. And this is not a tit-for-tat argument, but history speaks for itself. Millions of Jews found refuge in Turkey and Palestine fleeing the Nazi Holocaust. These are images of more European refugees in now war-torn Syria seeking a safe haven from the Nazi and Soviet invasion of Europe. Yet our collective memory perhaps chooses to forget these facts, and it all lies in Edward Said's Orientalism theory. Western narratives illustrate an inappropriate understanding of Asia and the Middle East, lands of imaginary danger, mystery, and barbarism. Yet it is these dangerous barbarians that were happy to take in Europeans when savagery tore the old continent.
On May 15th, 1939, more than 900 German Jews boarded an ocean liner called the St. Louis. The passengers had been stripped of their possessions, chased out of their homes, forced out of their schools, and banned from their professions by their own government. Their synagogues had been burnt, their stores raided, their clothing scarred with yellow stars. They had been forced to add Israel or Sarah to the names they had known their whole lives. The more than 900 stateless passengers on board considered themselves lucky. Lucky because they each carried on board an entrance visa to Cuba, a rare chance to escape the tyranny of the Nazi regime under Adolf Hitler. But by the time the ship docked in Havana Harbor, things would take a turn for the worse. The Cuban government refused to recognize their entrance visas, and only a few passengers were allowed to disembark. Even after men, women, and children threatened mass suicide, entry was denied. and so continued their long and tragic quest for safety. They would request asylum from Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, and Panama. Each said no. On June 2nd, the MS St. Louis was forced to leave Havana with no guarantee that they would be welcomed elsewhere. And after the Americans had denied their appeals, they sought refuge in Canada. But the Liberal government of Mackenzie King was unmoved by the plight of these refugees. Despite the desperate plea of the Canadian Jewish community, despite the repeated calls by the government's 2 Jewish caucus members, despite the many letters from concerned Canadians of different faiths, the government chose to turn its back on these innocent victims of Hitler's regime.
I'm gonna keep it real simple. If you combine the amount of aid Canada sends to African and Asian countries, it is still less than half the amount of money it has sent to Ukraine. Someone please explain to me how the sum total of all these numbers is not systemic racism.
So you don't agree then? I mean, when people say, oh, it's okay for him, he's escaped.
What have I escaped? Where, anyway, would I go to escape? To your country? Would I get a political asylum here? Where would a fleeing black man go if he wanted to escape?
Holy Christ. What was that? I just swallowed a bee.
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau apologizing yet again following the revelation of a third blackface incident, this time captured on video in an undated clip broadcast on Canada's Global News.
When I was in high school, I dressed up at a talent show and sang Deo. I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah, okay, Uncle, I hear you. I hear you.
Vice President Bharat Jagdeo, arguably the most powerful politician in the country. He spent 12 years as president and still pulls huge political weight. He's been heralded as a climate hero, promising to keep his country green even as it drills for oil.
Canada's temporary foreign worker programs are the subject of a scathing report from the United Nations. The UN Special Rapporteur on Contemporary Forms of Slavery says the programs for foreign agricultural workers are, quote, a breeding ground for modern forms of slavery. Tomoya Obokata says he heard accounts of exploitation and abuse for migrant workers during a 2-week fact-finding mission to Canada. And his report comes about a year after Jamaican farm workers in Ontario called attention to their own alleged mistreatment.
Jamaica sends about 10,000 seasonal workers to Canadian farms every year. The program invaluable to both countries. Canada for the labor it provides, Jamaica for the money workers send back.
I don't think so.
Chapter 6. Colonialism as a System for Underdeveloping Africa. Faced with evidence of European exploitation of Africa, many bourgeois writers would concede, at least partially, that colonialism was a system which functioned well in the interests of the metropoles. The reasoning has some sentimental persuasiveness. It appeals to the common sentiment that, after all, there must be two sides to a thing. The argument suggests that, on the one hand, there was exploitation and oppression, but on the other hand, colonial governments did much for the benefit of Africans, and they developed Africa. It is our contention that this is completely false. Colonialism only had one hand. It was a one-armed man. In the 1930s, there were riots throughout the West Indies because of the insupportable suffering of the African descendants who were left stranded in those parts after slavery. The Royal Commission investigating the grievances found them so shocking that the full findings were not published during the war, lest they reveal that colonialism was hardly better than the fascism against which Britain was fighting. The true situation can accurately be presented in the following terms. African workers and peasants produce for European capitalism goods and services of a certain value. A small proportion of the fruits of their efforts was retained by them in the form of wages, cash payments, and extremely limited social services, such as were essential to the maintenance of colonialism. The rest went to the various of the colonial system.
Everybody wants to get out and make some money and change their life.
OJ says his bunkhouse was infested with rats, tearing into packages of food. He also says he and others were verbally abused. The owner of the farm denies both accusations.
I'm suffering, but I am earning. You know, he's abusive, but I can pay the bill, weighing the pros and cons every day. So that it's a constant struggle for most of the guys.
OJ's anger spurred him to help write this open letter, likening Canada's seasonal agricultural workers program to systematic slavery. We are treated like mules and punished for not working fast enough, it says. The exploitation is at a seismic level. The letter triggered international headlines, prompting Jamaica to send a team to Canada to investigate. Our team visited dozens of farms, surveying and meeting with hundreds of workers across Canada.
The majority of workers felt that they were being treated either from fair up to excellent.
Their final report, released in May, put that number at 87%, describing close, almost familial relations between some farmers and workers. But there were also some farms where showers did not offer complete privacy, and farms where the number of toilets and showers appeared inadequate.
That was not.
Helene says there were also complaints of verbal abuse bordering on racism.
I'm not quite sure how you border on racism, but if it is anything like the Canadian and American border, I can assure you the racism is on both sides. I genuinely don't even know if that makes sense, but it seems to be the perfect retort to such a nonsensical statement as bordering on racism.
Those sound like really horrible things for them to report to say you were overall satisfied with what you saw.
You have the very bad and the very good in the program, but what we did find is that the very bad was not in the majority.
Do we say that most employers are pretty good, but there are some bad apples, or is it worse than that?
So we really don't know, and part of it is because awareness is so low and people are not coming forward. It's about employers, and there's good ones and there's bad ones, but we also see exploitation taking place amongst peers and managers and various levels of kind of the management structure within these industries where you see large majorities of temporary foreign workers. So in our first year of operating the Canadian Human Trafficking Hotline, about 6% of cases that we identified were labor trafficking cases, but that's really the tip of the iceberg. Like, we know that it's underreported, and part of it is also because it takes very unique targeted outreach strategies to be able to connect with migrants because they're so isolated in our communities. Many are coming with language barriers, they're in rural and remote areas, they're reliant on their employer to transport them to places, and they're also not eligible for the same services as other permanent residents and citizens. So we've got a really robust set of programs and services for settlement, immigration settlement in Canada. They're actually not mandated to serve temporary foreign workers. So if we get a call on the hotline and someone's in an abusive situation and they want to be able to access housing supports or service navigation, there's a whole ecosystem of supports that categorically excludes temporary foreign workers, making them more vulnerable to exploitation and more reliant on their employers.
Jamaican farm workers at Triguno and Kaiweens wrote this letter because they knew the minister was coming and he wouldn't see the truth of it, right? But you know what? Like, this hasn't been revealed yet, but we have footage from that visit. And in it, he says to the workers, you have to serve the bosses. By working here, you're serving your country, you're serving your family, but you have to serve the bosses, right? The message that they gave to them is like, just shut up and keep working. And why not? I mean, Jamaica's effectively, and like countries like Philippines and Indonesia, the entire GDP is now being based on exporting people who can then send remittances back home. So there's this kind of alliance between the employers, the government of Canada, the government of sending countries to keep people just quietly working because everyone's making money off of it.
That letter that was written by the migrant workers, the Jamaican migrant workers.
From 2 farms, yeah.
From 2 farms. One of those farms was highlighted in a national grocery store's flyer.
As these are hand-picked peaches by this father and son and grandfather, Joe. Those hands have never touched those peaches. You know, it is the hands of black men. It is the hand of Mexicans and Filipinos who work there, who have been picking that food and sending it to us. So the absolute denial of who feeds us, you know, the truth is everywhere it says buy local, eat local produce, support farmers, and you have these happy white faces. I'm sorry, those people aren't really growing most of your food anymore. Some are, that's true, many are not. It's been 2 weeks, nothing since this letter's out, nothing's happened. It's been 2 weeks since people have died, but this year already so many other people have died. Like, at what point will there be action? So I found it egregious, I found it disgusting. I think, like, you could walk into a food line right now and it's still there. I want to add a very big stakeholder, right? So think about it this way. Canada is the world's 5th largest exporter of agri-food. Right? The amount of money that is made in agri-food in Canada is greater than the GDP of Jamaica.
Wow.
Okay? They have this pressure on them from the people who buy food from them and then the supermarkets. Who's the richest person in this country? He's the guy who owns this supermarket, like the owner of Loblaws. Right? This is a country controlled. There are only 5 supermarket chains in the country. All of them are owned between these 5 corporations. And so they have an enormous interest in keeping workers exploitable, keeping them in these dangerous conditions. Not just farm workers, but also the truck drivers who are migrants, also the restaurant workers who are migrants. But the solution is simple. Prime Minister Trudeau has to give full and permanent immigration status to all migrants right now. He knows
that gives them leverage.
That gives them leverage. That lets them walk away from a bad job. That lets them get into a union. That lets them say, you can't treat me like this. That lets them have their families visit them. That lets them have a day off. I mean, these are human beings, you know. We fall in love. Maybe we have a bad mental health day. We are not machines.
12 people have already died this year alone on Canadian farms that your organization is aware of.
We know of a dozen people who have died, and but we are now hearing more reports, so we're actually trying to figure out what the exact numbers are.
Does the government keep track of these numbers?
No. We try to keep track when our members tell us. But here's the thing. What about all the people who die when they're not here? Who fall sick, inhale pesticides, get injured, and the employers ship them home before they die?
For anybody watching, any Canadian watching, who feels passionate about this or who's starting to feel passionate about this, what can the average Canadian do to help if they want to?
The first thing I want you to do is to go to statusforall.ca and sign our petition. We're sending a message to Prime Minister Trudeau. That's the first thing.
But what the workers need are reparations in the form of unpaid wages. They want, like the workers in this Project Note case, they came to us. We asked them if they wanted to exit the situation. They said no, because they had taken loans to come here and they needed to pay those loans back. Now they're being housed for a couple of months, and after that, where do they go? Over and over again, people who are being rescued are actually being deported. This isn't a policing matter. This is a labor issue created by immigration laws and policies. Everyone loves calling it trafficking because it exceptionalizes it, makes it about bad apples, when the real issue is systematically the government has given power to employers to exploit people, and they'll continue to do so.
We feel that the problem, number one, of the black man in America is beyond America's ability to solve. It's a human problem, not an American problem or a Negro problem. And as a human problem or a world problem, we feel that it should be taken out of the jurisdiction of the United States government and the United States courts and taken into the United Nations in the same manner that the problems of the black man in South Africa, Angola, and other parts of the world, and even the way they're trying to bring the problems of the Jews in Russia into the United Nations because of violation of human rights. We believe that our problem is one not of violation of civil rights, but a violation of human rights. Not only are we denied the right to be a citizen in the United States, we're denied the right to be a human being.
And ask yourself, am I okay with people living in systematic slavery?
Otherwise, of course, you can despair. Walk down the street of any city, any afternoon, and look around you. What you got to remember is what you're looking at is also you. Everyone you're looking at is also you. You could be that person. You could be that monster. You could be that cop. And you're to decide in yourself not to be. There may not be, as much humanity in the world as one would like to see. But there is some. There's more than one would think. In any case, if you break faith with what you know, that's a betrayal of many, 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 many people. I may know 6 people, but that's enough. Love has never been a popular movement, and no one's ever wanted really to be free. The world is held together, really it is held together, by the love and the passion of very few people.
Some leave Senegal to go to Spain. What they are going to do there? Agriculture, that they leave behind. They go to harvest apples there, while they leave the same activity here. Before, they were thinking about how to migrate. But they told me now they don't think about that. With this borehole we put in place, now we are going to work 12 months on vegetable production. Now these young boys who are very key for the village security, for the village development, now don't need to go to live just the old people in the village. Now they will contribute to the local dynamic of the community.
Where emptiness and clarity collide. Well, I wonder, do you feel the shift in tide? See your face up in the mirror, feel your heart is getting clearer. This fear must fly. Sit, oh, strengthen your weakness, will to overcome, but you're too big to fail, and the worst is yet to come. Don't wrestle your demons, don't be slave to your guilt. There's just one exit, and the worst is yet to come. Slowly, 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 hold your breath. Release the mechanisms that protect. Will your small heart from breaking and your big heart from shaking? Yeah, this fear must die. I said, whoa, whoa, whoa. Strengthen your weakness, will to overcome, but you're too big to fail, and the worst is yet to come. Don't wrestle your demons, don't be a slave to your guilt. There's just one exit, and the best is yet to come.
Thank God that we're different than the United States, and we don't have the systemic, deep roots they have had for years. When I went down to the U.S., spent 20 years back and forth building a company down there, I said the difference between the U.S. and Canada, for the most part, we get along. We all live beside each other. We work together. We share communities. We go shopping. And so, believe me, it's night and day on when it comes to Canada and the U.S. I'm proud to be Canadian.
Ford family's history with drug dealing.
I apologize.
Doug Ford sold hashish for several years in the 1980s. Brother Randy was also involved in the drug trade. Brother Randy, wait, that remind me of someone.
Oh my Christ, I knew that little bugger. I'm good, he's down here buzzing around right now. He has a lot of real estate.
Uh-oh, did someone say real estate?
I made a promise to you that I wouldn't touch the greenbelt.
A few moments later.
I broke that promise. And for that, I'm very, very sorry.
I'm sorry, and I sincerely apologize.
I pride myself on keeping our promises. It was a mistake to open the greenbelt. It was a mistake to establish a process that moved too fast.
We moved too fast.
Going 100 miles an hour and
Move fast to put in measures.
The decisions were also made without the proper discussion with municipalities or First Nations. Without First Nations. This is reminding me of someone.
It left too much room for some people to benefit over others. It caused people to question our motives.
That was an act of genocide against indigenous people. An act of genocide. Hey, wait a minute, that reminds me of someone.
This is a general manager of China's largest state-run construction firm who confirmed that companies use middlemen to pay these bribes.
If you live in a democracy, why does your government work like this?
It's companies like the one he works for, linked directly to the Chinese Communist Party, who win a lot of Guyana's largest government contracts.
Ministers and I have been trying to work with the federal government to fix the existing federal sick pay program.
I work for one of the biggest state-run organisations, and the way that they're seeming to do business here is also very much under the table. It does imply very much that the Beijing authorities know exactly what's going on.
Unfortunately, Monday's federal budget didn't include the important improvements to the Canada Recovery Sickness Benefit that we needed to see.
I'm on the phone till 11, 12 o'clock at night, going 100 miles an hour, and
I've been clear.
I don't watch the news.
I believe that opening the Greenbelt could make a big difference. That it would build 50,000 new homes, housing a minimum of 150,000 people.
However, an Auditor General's report released earlier this month said that not only was the development of the Greenbelt not necessary to reach the province's goal of building 1.5 million homes, but that the decision-making process favored certain developers, 3 of which now own about 92% of the previously protected land.
Why you always lying? Oh my God, stop lying.
I don't watch the news. Going 100 miles an hour, and
we got it wrong. We made a mistake.
And we made the wrong decision. The truth remains.
For our deal, Mr. Su painted us a wide range of investment opportunities: logging rights, a stone quarry, gold mining, and the most promising of all, land in a prime location where a hotel and casino could be built to cash in on the oil boom. Su says the money we pay him, under the guise of legitimate business, will actually make it to the vice president.
Triflin. Doug Ford just got caught doing all of that, as well as his administration. As good as it feels to believe these people are stupid, they're not stupid, they are trifling. I will prove it to you right now. Doug Ford, explain systemic racism.
For some, it's been dealing with isolation at home, the struggles with mental health and addiction. For others, it's been going to work, despite the stress of working in a job that puts you and your loved ones at a higher risk of getting COVID. I hear it every day, every single day. And I know that those measures, especially around enforcement, they went too far.
More of the same. Accepting the status quo. Will only make the housing affordability crisis worse.
Blackface Trudeau, explain why the Seasonal Agricultural Workers Program is systematic slavery, and you could put a stop to it, but you don't.
Women and men who had once contributed so much to their country had been labeled aliens, traitors, and enemies, and treated as such. persecuted, robbed, jailed, and killed because of who they were. Nazi Germany had denied them their citizenship and their fundamental rights.
Because even if you do something for the wrong reasons, with the wrong intentions, it can still be wrong.
I'm aware, that I and the people I love may perish in the morning. I know that. But there's a light on our faces now. If you live under the shadow of death, it gives you a certain freedom. So I'm perfectly happy, hard as it sounds, and relatively free.
Walt Disney, Nike, Google. Now who's gonna be the Medici family and stand up and let me create more? Or do you want to marginalize me till I'm out of my moment? Or